us. So I'll have our panelists come on up. We have Swati Jain with C Prime, Marc Ray with Clear Vision. These are two of our partners that we've already touched on. We have version 1, Ian Culling, the CTO of version 1, also a partner of ours.
Did we just figure out how?
And yeah, we'll just figure it out. And Wendy Cotter from Power Plant.
Do we get timed?
So do you guys want to spend 30, 60 seconds introducing yourself? Swati?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Kyle. This is working? Yes. Hi, everyone. This is Swati Jain. And I head up the solution and service delivery operations at C Prime. We are a professional service provider that helps organizations with agile transformations and also their Atlassian tools initiatives. A little bit about my background. I began my career in quality assurance, so testing is still a discipline that's near and dear to me. Over the last decades, I've primarily focused my efforts on agile product management, have headed up agile PMOs, solution teams, and as of recently, just working with several organizations in their agile and tools transformation. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Swati.
Yes, I'm Ian Culling. I'm CTO at version 1, responsible for product development, which includes test, support, hosted operations, IT, pretty much all things technical in the company. I've been there about 10 years. Was actually the first customer of version 1 with a small team transitioning to XP. And then a customer again later with a 90 to 100% organization transforming from really rigid heavyweight waterfall to essentially a scrum of scrums type implementation.
Thanks, Wendy.
Hi, good morning. My name is Wendy Cotter. I'm with a company called Power Plan here in Atlanta. We do asset management for asset-intensive companies. It's some really exciting software. Little sarcasm in there. So we have recently transitioned into Agile, probably about 3 years ago. I was brought in about 2 years ago to focus on improving the Agile processes. And my background from that is I actually used to work with Kyle, and we worked at Qualcomm together, and we transformed the company there from waterfall to Agile. And there are a couple of other attendees here too that were part of that transition, so it was a lot of fun. Background is consulting over into QA to a bit of BA, a kind of jack of all trades. It's been kind of fun along the way. So looking forward to today.
Great. Marc?
Marc Ray, Head of Client Services for Clear Vision. We're also an Atlassian consultancy, so we're known worldwide to be Atlassian experts, Jira, Confluence, and so forth. I come by Agile from being as I like to say, a recovering project manager. So I had sometimes taken teams kicking and screaming to a bit more of an Agile process, iterative delivery, and so forth. And many times we come about Agile teams through our implementation of the Atlassian tools and so forth.
Awesome. Great. Well, before I kind of dive into the questions, I want to try to get some audience participation. And so I just want to make sure we're kind of feeling this out right. But please, let's don't be shy. I don't want to be that guy that has to ask the question a second time. We're testers, so let's go through efficiency here. So how many of you are either doing Agile or working in companies using Agile? Please show me and raise a hand. Okay, good. We're spot on there. Thanks. How many of you have been in and around Agile for 5 years? Good. Questions are going to go well then. 10 years? Awesome. Very good. Also using some statistics, version 1 just put out their 10th annual survey. Some very good information there if you have not used it. A little plug for you there.
Yeah, thanks.
So inside of that, I do believe that about 74.32% of all stats are made up. So inside of this, though it does talk about, in this survey, stand-ups, and that about 83% of organizations that are doing Agile do stand-ups. Show of hands, who's doing stand-ups? Okay, fairly representative. Second on the list, prioritize backlogs. You guys are running backlogs. Raise your hands. Okay, good. We're participating. We are awake. The caffeine is kicking in. And short iterations, whatever short means. You guys doing short iterations? Okay, great. You guys got your work cut out for you, right? This is not an
Yeah.
Agile 101 panel. So we
It'll be
hope to go
fun.
deep and have you guys kind of share Agile and where we're going there. So the state of Agile. So Georgia must be the state of Agile. That's what this is about. I'm kidding. I'm from Alabama, as already alluded to, with Dave, very competitive. We know football. And this is not about the state of Agile being Georgia. It's about the state of Agile and where we are. So a lot of companies been doing Agile a very long time. A lot of people look at Agile that have not been doing it a long time or going into new organizations where they've done Agile, but the organization isn't doing Agile, and they claim that Agile can kind of be that silver bullet, that Agile can do everything. Given that a lot of people in this room have been doing Agile a long time, and given you guys know a lot about this and talk a lot either about the market or as a practitioner, Wendy, maybe you can speak to some of those that are trying to use Agile as a silver bullet and to what Agile is not a silver bullet for. Any thoughts?
Start.
I can go first. Actually, I know even though our organization helps with Agile transformations, I will actually make a broad statement that it's really not a silver bullet for anything. Agile is a process. It's a framework that offers best practice guidelines on how to drive efficiencies, how to drive more productivity as a team. It's, at the end of the day, all about the people. So more than Agile, the focus should be on making sure you have the right roles on the team, the right skills on the team. There's a level of servant leadership attitude in the organization. You have good change agents in the organization, and also making sure there is a general investment and buy-in on getting the teams the necessary training and coaching. That's how I see it.
Anything else, guys?
Yeah, so I think the silver bullet thing I'm not really sure about exactly, but I do know that running any project in a waterfall-based way, like where you think you know everything up front, is pretty foolish, right? So Gartner's been talking about bimodal IT for a while. They're going to back off that, apparently. We had an analyst in last week who thought it was not the smartest thing they've ever said. Forrester just ripped them a new one, actually, in a recent report about bimodal IT. They're obviously recommending transforming to iterative methods for project delivery, right? So, it's just, like learn. Yeah.
So Gardner would say that bimodal IT, that there are certain projects or certain parts of the organization where maybe more of a waterfall structure delivery makes sense. Are you saying that you don't believe in that?
I don't believe that.
So you don't think hybrid skills,
Uh,
having that waterfall plus Agile
what
go
does that
together in
mean?
an
What does that mean?
organization?
Like
Parts
Agile
of the
within a
organization
waterfall?
doing waterfall, and maybe parts, maybe
Well,
your
I mean,
portfolio teams are more waterfallish, and your execution teams might still be more agile. Do you think that works? What's been your experience?
So I think in a transformation, it's a multi-year effort in large companies, right? So you're going to have, I think not every project will magically transform to iterative. So you're going to end up with like a hybrid environment for a period of time, but
Right.
I think over time, even if you're talking about, some people talk about, oh well, it's legacy code, so we're going to continue doing the waterfall thing. I mean,
So short term, okay, long
yeah.
term.
I mean,
the goal
it's
should be
short
to
term,
move to Agile.
like be pragmatic, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point because most people try to attribute waterfall, at least what I've seen a lot is people try to attribute a methodology down to a technology and so forth. So
Right.
we've seen organizations where they're like, oh, we write COBOL, so that has to be in waterfall or
Right.
something like that. And realistically, the part that people are missing is that you can still do iterative development, even if that doesn't mean something is going out every 2 weeks or every month to the end user. You can still internally adopt iterative methodologies for delivery of your software and for your internal stakeholders.
But going back to your original question around it being a silver bullet, I'm okay with that up front. I'm okay with people saying, it's a silver bullet, it's going to fix everything for us, because at least they're talking about it, and at least they're starting the conversation to consider transforming their existing processes. And even if it doesn't fix everything, which we know it doesn't in the long run,
By
because it
itself.
does go back down to people and change, and how are they handling the change, and how is this going to shake up their world? At least they're having a conversation.
Yeah, they're thinking about it, which
Yep.
is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a starting point.
So a question came up in the last with Scott and his speaker in regards to the size of organizations and how do you speak to small groups versus large groups. Are there companies that are too big to do Agile? We certainly see it moving up market and continue to move up market. But are there companies that are too big to be doing Agile?
Well, there's always scaled Agile framework. So for those of you who may not be familiar, I mean, so SAFE is for organizations the way Agile is for the team. So as a framework, it offers some great guidelines on how you, even in a large enterprise, how do you identify the right combination of value streams and then align your release trains, your release teams, your Scrum teams along the same cadence to drive better alignment, better collaboration, and overall better predictability as at an enterprise level.
Right.
So I don't think Agile by itself can work for large enterprises. You do have to borrow some of the principles, even if not the entire framework. You can borrow some of the principles that SAFE as a framework has to offer to help align your entire enterprise and help take that through that transformation.
Yeah, SAFE is the most popular scaling Agile approach. I think largely because they went the Scrum Master route, so there's certifications for SAFE, so everybody loves that. And they're making a bunch of money off it. There are others, less and DAD are things I would encourage you guys to look at. For any of these things, though, be careful of the human nature side of adopting a framework like this, because we tend to do everything all the time. This was the demise of RUP, right? Yeah. There are 100 artifacts. Well, we'll do them all, and then it's this heavyweight waterfall. SAFE has that same kind of smell to me. So it's sort of understand the purpose of a practice or an activity and apply it judiciously. I think it's super important. Or you'll end up probably taking most of the innovation away from the team. So it'll be very much a top-down command and control type of implementation in most cases. That would be a big concern for me trying to apply those like within any mid to large organization.
So
Yeah,
show
but
of
I
hands.
think, this is where a real quick point on that, Kyle. I mean, this is where it is important to have the right coach, the right change agents in the organization. So they're also making sure as this framework is implemented, even in a lightweight fashion, it doesn't take away that collaboration and flexibility and innovation at any level in the organization. So it's important to have good coaches, good change agents in order to drive success there.
So quick show of hands, is anybody either using SAFE or considering SAFE? Okay, good. Yeah, the numbers will generally roll out of the 80% of organizations that are doing Agile, then about 20 or 25 are either doing SAFE or looking at using SAFE. And so, with that, they talk about the older days of Agile where the beauty of Agile is teams and nimbleness, and they set their own cadence and they get work done. Does that compete in any way with kind of SAFE and putting a framework of collaboration around the nimbleness that Agile can or should provide?
I think it's part of it. I mean, it's at a certain scale. Within SAFE is a huge kind of undertaking for an organization. Yes. But if you look at the execution part of it, the nimbleness comes from having, if it's a software development team, giving them the ability to kind of work in that iterative cycle and to find, kick the tires on the software sooner, find the defects sooner within their part of the kind of full SAFE framework. So you have multiple teams working on multiple products, and each within their own team, they have that ability to do the experimentation and to have those Agile principles in place.
Yeah, and one of the core principles of SAFE is centralized planning, but decentralized decision making. So going back to the previous point, if you have the right coaches, the right change agents, they should help drive towards that principle where even though planning is more aligned to making sure initiatives are aligned, all your activities are ultimately aligned to some business outcome, to some strategic initiative. The decision making on a day-to-day basis at an execution level still stays in control of the team. So, the core value or principle of Agile is not lost at a team level.
Okay. So for SAFE being this kind of recipe for scaling across organizations and these other methodologies that are used, if the majority of organizations are doing Agile and a small percentage, at least in this room, are doing SAFE, then how do organizations that are doing Agile still look to deliver on communication and governance and bringing in other parts of the software organization that are not your specific developers and testers? How is that going on? How do you guys talk to the market, or how do you do that in your organization?
Well, we have our separate product team, which is much more traditional. Our customers are much more traditional. They're not change agents. They want solid software that has been around for a long time. So when we go and meet with them and try and integrate them into our development process, we actually get a lot of pushback. They're like, we already want it done. We don't want to give you the details. We're in regulatory business, right? You should know the details. So we've actually struggled with that in our current situation. However, in previous companies, integrating folks early and having the customers at the table and sharing them the demos on a regular basis and not trying to hide behind some slideware has been very successful. And it's about, again, building the relationships with the customers and making it a safe environment that you can, kind of have an honest conversation.
Credibility, yep.
Mm-hmm.
How about you guys? Anything else to add on, how and in what ways that you?
Well, we have a platform for scaling. You can
pitch.
check it out outside. We do actually have support for all the major scaling approaches, primarily because of the flexibility of our product. But anyway.
Yeah, but I
there's the
think,
plug.
and this is where you don't have to bring in everything that's safe. This is not about safe framework. This is not about selling the framework itself. But there are some good principles, good practices suggested by the framework around governance, the need for budget management, and how do you do budget management at a strategic level but still allow flexibility at the team level to allocate distribute your resources differently than the original plan. So it has a lot of good kind of guidelines on how you inject some of that budgeting governance into your practices, whether or not you're going with the full-blown framework. One of the things when we're working with enterprises that are not necessarily full-blown safe, but they're looking to kind of bridge this gap where you have stakeholders with a more waterfall mindset, but your teams are more agile. More than demos, we like to do show and tell sessions. This is what we kind of, this is the terminology we go with, is just to kind of manage the mindset. It's not a demo of a full working solution. We're showing and telling you what we've done, let's say in the last 2 weeks, and looking to bring you in early on into the process and get your feedback so we can pivot if necessary or keep moving depending on the direction provided by stakeholders. So I think there are still some good principles you can bring even if you're not going with, the whole framework.
Okay. Back to just kind of general Agile and kind of non-safe specific questions. Part of that survey talks about why Agile projects fail, right? And they talk about culture, they talk about management support, they talk about just lack of experience in Agile. But, people in the room are doing Agile, the market is doing Agile. Is it just the traditional kind of management philosophy and they're not familiar with it? If Agile is bringing visibility and it's bringing communication and it's bringing quicker cycles, when you guys are either selling your software, Ian, or you guys are out talking to prospects, and they ask this question about, what could go wrong or why is this project going to fail? Are there any of those three things that resonate, or are there any other ways that you address the challenges of why Agile projects would fail?
Well, certainly, cultural change is huge. Right? So I mentioned earlier that it transformed an organization from hardcore, very rigorous waterfall to Agile methods, and it took a long time. And the biggest challenge there, in comparison to a team that really had no process to XP, biggest challenge there is everyone knew what cog they were in the big machine, right? And super comfortable there. And so it was a big change problem. Right? And even developers who I would think would love to be working in a more Agile team than in a waterfall thing where testers write defects up on you and I'm waiting for a spec and all that crap. But it was really just the change thing, right? Just people comfortable in their daily existence. And I think the larger, more rigorous kind of organizations, it's going to be even harder, for sure.
And again, going back to that environment of, you want to fail fast, and nobody wants to fail. So that, you're giving a lot more visibility to people failing, and there's a lot of fear with that. So we've struggled with that a lot. And the other thing that we struggle with is tech debt, right? How do you make sure you're so focused on getting this new feature done and building something new and shiny? How do you make sure that we're focusing on making it a solid product or thinking about it from a technical perspective, so it's not an immediate need from a customer? It's not going to sell something, but I still need to work on the infrastructure.
Yeah, sustainable pace and sustainable deliverability are super important. We actually invest about 20% of our capacity in tech chores or tech debt. So the entire team every 5th week will focus on their backlog. So the developers own the code base, right? That's theirs. And keeping it healthy and a productive, enjoyable place to work is their responsibility. But you have to give them time, right? And that's why we deliver every quarter and have for 12 years, right? Sustainably and with like excellent quality.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're going to make them responsible, you have to give them the authority and the capacity to take care of the code base. And testers participate in it too.
Yeah, and just to also add to that, a lot of times quality issues and speed issues are further downstream when you're looking to see whether or not you're going to meet your release date or post-release, right? How is the quality, stability? These are not things that stakeholders, executives are thinking about consciously necessarily, right? These things is either a worry of an architect or comes to surface over time, and how much of that technical debt you've accumulated over time. What we hear in our conversations a lot of times with clients saying, well, we are an Agile shop. We have Scrum teams. We have Scrum masters. We have product owners. But it's not working. We're not delivering. Teams are not delivering their committed story points. Our velocity is not steady and not stable. What do we do about it? And this is where, fundamentally, you go back and see whether or not, first of all, the people in those roles have the right skills to perform those roles. Do your product managers or product owners really know how to effectively break down stories that realistically can be done within your iteration and, given whatever architectural constraints you may have? Are your Scrum Masters good facilitators? We find a lot of gaps when we actually stand and observe some of their stand-ups, their retrospective sessions. These people are not driving and facilitating conversations in a manner that can truly surface up things early on, your bottlenecks, your challenges early on. And same thing with review meetings and planning sessions. Are people facilitating conversations to truly ask difficult questions on, if you rated this a 5 versus a 3, why is that? Let's talk about it. Let's dissect this a little bit more so you can surface up those challenges early on. So it's also going back to your people and whether or not they're leveraging these ceremonies effectively.
Yeah. One of
a lot of it.
Just to add on a little bit to the sustainable delivery. One of the things that you'll note in the 10th annual Agile survey is the technical practices are pretty weak in terms of adoption, right? They're like TDD, pairing, even CI, which is the simplest, most valuable thing you can do, right? Are way down the list in terms of practices that people are adopting. And what you find is that's a recipe for disaster, right? Like you'll iterate your way to a big ball of mud that you can no longer maintain and extend. So CI, test-driven development, functional automation around the product. You have to have all that to truly be iterative and for the code base to stay malleable over time. So that's super disappointing to me. And I think that's a bit of the Scrum effect, right? So most Scrum Master training today, they fold in some of the XP developer practices finally, but originally it wasn't. It was just like, here are the 3 roles and 30 days and and super easy to digest. But
Yep. Cool. Mark?
Going back to your point about failure, what we've seen is just, usually when we've seen failures is a lack of true commitment to the actual Agile processes and a lack of commitment across the organization. So it's, a lot of times it's, well, our dev team is Agile. Oh, you can't just have an Agile dev team. You have to have Agile business stakeholders. You have to have full team participation.
Right.
Doing a daily stand-up doesn't necessitate an Agile team. And so it's been a lack of real commitment, sometimes even from management, to actually participate and to make the organization, or at least enough of the organization, Agile to allow for that success to kind of brew. And the last one was what we've seen is, people get 1 or 2 or 3 sprints. They expect, like, out of sprint 1, your velocity is going to be set, and we always tell them, get to sprint 6.
Takes time.
Have fun until you get there, but your velocity is going to be up and down. It's going to be all over the place. You're going to have people late to your stand-ups. You're going to have to shake all that out. It's a long-term commitment, and you're not going to see the fruits of it on day 1.
Yeah, and one more thing to add to that is also prepare management that you have to maintain this self-contained team in order to get a steady velocity. Anytime you pull in a member because, we have a support issue, and now this person needs to go help with that issue, it is going to impact and introduce that imperfection in your velocity and make you less predictable.
Fair point.
So it's truly understanding all the repercussions of the decisions management sometimes makes without keeping all this in mind.
Great, thanks. So moving into, if I were drawing Venn diagrams, right? There's Agile, which is, writing your code and testing your code and getting, points delivered. There's DevOps, which is how quickly can I get, this code to my customer. And then there's CI, right? Continuous integration, right? Which is doing builds, X number of times per Y, right? Whereas that can be, many times a day, right? But you talk about, those kind of three moving parts. Can an organization be agile without really handling CI or DevOps? We're kind of going into that, but let's kind of tackle DevOps first, right? Aren't you just piling up a bunch of work? If you're doing agile really well, aren't you just piling up a bunch of work that you aren't efficiently getting out to customers? How do you have the conversation about getting functionality to customers and DevOps in relation to Agile, especially with an organization that's either in the early stages of trying to be Agile or going through some of these pain points? I think it's pretty straightforward, right? The Scrum Master, and you got to have a stand-up, and this, the cadence and the points and those types of things. I think we're kind of moving past that. But how do you have conversations with, customers about, DevOps in relation specifically to Agile, how important that is?
I know how we've handled that is one thing at a time. So if you have a team moving to Agile and they have a kind of convoluted release process, or it's very manual, you're filling out a Word document and emailing it to someone to then pull down specific commits and so forth. We always try to focus on if you're committing to Agile first, then let's commit to that, because that's going to have an inherent increase in code quality and value that will go down through whatever your release process is then. And then once you've got that cadence, they brought up technical debt. We try to handle it sometimes in that fashion where we say, okay, what can we do to iteratively pick off, the continuous integration, getting your build process working, and then looking to more continuous delivery, but not trying to tackle it as one big monolithic project. Because if you work in the Agile part and you work in your software delivery part, that's going to create new artifacts and inform your CI and then your CD process.
Swati, anything there?
Yeah, sure. So, I think this is where it's a conversation first for us to have with customers. First of all, to understand what are your objectives. Are you trying to work on team collaboration and productivity first? Or are you really looking to get software out to the market quickly to your customers? And then to that effect, also understanding what's the appetite of your customers. I mean, Wendy here just mentioned her customers and even stakeholders internally are not very agile in that sense. So they may not have an appetite to consume this release or frequent releases without going through the necessary change management process on their side. So it's really understanding what those objectives are. But I agree with Marc to that effect, is you still have to start with a slice of the problem. Scott mentioned this earlier today too. You can't change everything overnight. You can't go from waterfall to Agile overnight. So you really have to start with getting the teams working, performing on a high productivity level, collaborating at a good level, bringing customers early on into their development process so that they are part of this initiative, and then moving to DevOps from that point on. But if, once you've made that Agile transformation successfully, hands down, DevOps is the next thing to go, because that's really what's going to help you with improving your code quality, getting code to customer as soon as they're ready for it. And even if they're not ready, you put it on the shelf, park it, and deploy it as soon as they're ready.
It's funny, about 5-6 years ago, people would come to us wanting to buy the Scrum, right, or the Agile. Now they're coming to us wanting to buy the DevOps, right? Yeah. So, and I think for large enterprises that are laggards, that are way behind this adoption curve, it's a much more tangible, concrete thing for them to like glom onto. So continuous delivery and having pipelines and all that kind of stuff. From my perspective, DevOps is really just an extension of Agile methods. Where Agile methods, it was like, oh, get the customer, the developer, and testers working closely, holistically, and now it's pull an ops perspective in. It doesn't mean you have a separate DevOps team, right? It's the team now from all the way from early planning considers operations perspective, and design into it deployability and instrumentation for feedback and all that kind of stuff. And that's, so it really is, for me, an umbrella over everything, just a yet more holistic way of thinking about software development and delivery.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because if DevOps and testing and other parts are just walled gardens, then it's an absolute recipe for failure, and that those teams need to be more embedded. And that's something we run across where, your release team is completely disconnected from, the developers. There's a separate release team that releases everything.
Right.
They have no clue why. There's
Right.
they don't know the business drivers. They don't know the importance behind things.
Right.
So it's definitely, it's part of DevOps is a cultural change too.
Wendy, you've done this in a number of organizations. Is the theory of, hey, just let's do Agile and let's pile stuff up at the door of the delivery team and just kind of forcing the stuff downhill? Is that how it works?
Ugly every single time, but that's what we're doing today.
Right.
I don't think it's ideal, but I think you also have to think, going back to the adoption of all these changes and processes and how much do you introduce and how quickly, and are you fully adopting these things before you go on and start following the next pretty silver object, right? Because that's what I'm seeing a lot of people do is they're not implementing, CI we struggle with. We don't want to invest in that because that's not fun and exciting. But if we can't do that, then we can't do DevOps. So, with our new product that we're starting to talk about and cloud-based and all of that, fun stuff, we're talking more about DevOps and how do we get this customer, how do we make this less of a burden to implement with our customers. And so, to your point, it's having that conversation earlier.
Cool. So let's get into kind of the CI elements of that. We kind of talked about builds and doing builds X times per day, or if you're talking about Facebook, then they're releasing every 30 minutes and having their customers test their code. But generally in CI, right, we're just talking about how do we get developers to commit code more often? How do we create the communication? How do we start to line stuff up earlier? How are we doing those builds? Not to steal the next panel's thunder, Ryan, but I mean the whole next panel is about testing in an Agile environment. But automation and testing and test automation is an extremely important piece of the equation if you're doing CI. You have to automate things. You can't have people manually pushing buttons, millions of times every minute or whatever that might be. So what is you guys' kind of viewpoint on the importance, given that we're in a room of testers, on the importance of test and test automation as a part of getting CI and Agile delivery correct?
I think it's critical.
Yeah, I mean, continuous integration is
Good
is like
answer.
I say, continuous integration is it's a practice, and there's CI servers, and every commit triggers a build. You get feedback immediately, hopefully, not like on the order of minutes, but as quickly as you can for developers. It was to address the issue where people will branch and then come back 3 months later and try to merge. So you do it early and often. That's like CI, continuous delivery, and just a couple little sort of definitions because it's confusing to me all the time. Continuous delivery is always having releasable code, not where every change goes out to production.
Right.
Continuous deployment, every change goes to production.
Right.
In a controlled, risk-free manner, basically. But it requires a ton of automation,
Yes.
both around, obviously, test, but then also deployment automation, and so forth.
Cool.
What we've seen is to strike we try to encourage people to strike the right balance on testing. So some people think automated testing is a panacea, and there are certain things. We work with clients that have very back-endish software, so you can automate a lot of stuff. Is it returning the right value? Is the tax being calculated correctly? Those are things you can write automated tests for. We also have clients that do very visual, front-facing, pretty websites. There's not all, you sometimes can't automate, does this look good?
Right.
So it's about helping people strike a balance and not try to go down just one route, thinking that this is going to be the panacea of testing.
Yeah, I mean, I think automated tests, like functional automation, that's inventory, right? You need to only store so much, or it becomes like baggage, right? Because obviously, you're going to invest a lot more effort in that than, say, TDD, like test-driven development. Developers, I mean, they're refactoring tests as they go, so it just kind of maintains itself. Functional automation is just be judicious. That's
Yeah. And to that, when do you do test automation? Is it in the same sprint, or is it in some kind of a following sprint when things are more stable? so that time and money is rightly invested. So I think there is that element to it. Going back to Marc's earlier point of striking the right balance.
Yep.
How much you do, when you do is also critical.
Yep. But you have to have that commitment up front to invest in the automation. Because if you're not, which we've had with our legacy product, 5 million lines of code and 0 automation. So, getting a release out our door is difficult, and we know that we cannot test every permutation.
Good.
And you can do continuous integration with COBOL on a mainframe. We did it like 10 years ago. A different company. We don't have COBOL at version 1. It was a banking thing.
Everything in version 1's not written in COBOL?
No.
Oh, okay.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys. Just kind of speaking on, I think it'd be a disservice not to talk about mobile, right? So just maybe one last question before we get to maybe some of what the audience has asked. Mobile is, it's the first thought now, right? It's not how do I take my website and how do I turn that into a mobile application or a mobile user experience. Certainly you guys are coming up against mobile conversations, I would assume, on kind of a daily basis, and how Agile and CI and DevOps, and how does this relate to organizations that are doing mobile? Is that the same conversation as it is for people mainly on websites? Is that different? What are some of the unique ways that people are addressing mobile with Agile that you'd want to share with the group here?
So last week I was at a conference in Raleigh, this Agile Alliance technical conference, and Martin Fowler and some other woman, who I can't remember her name, did a talk specifically on Agile methods applied to mobile, where app stores are an issue and all that kind of stuff. So I would encourage you guys to go out there and check out the recording of that talk. She talked about specific tools that allow for CI and faster deployments to app stores and all that kind of stuff.
I think the core constructs still apply, because at the end of the day, it's software that is being deployed on some platform.
Yep.
But going back to Ian's point, the tools, the technology might be slightly different, and also the barriers might be different. Just taking and getting, there's a full lead period involved in Apple reviewing your app before actually you can release it to market and things like that. So there are different barriers, definitely, but I think internally you can still leverage the same constructs to realize the benefits of producing an app quickly and with good quality.
I think we're mobile. The reason why we're seeing a lot of innovation in the DevOps world is we're still in the black and white TV era. So there's a lot of pioneers, and so everybody's trying to innovate as quickly as possible to get their stake in the ground. So that means being able to get changes out as quickly as possible to the devices.
Good stuff. Jeff, anything else? We have 3 questions on the app. Do the top 3. Wow. Not as young as I think. I'm going to read. In Agile, testing becomes a shared responsibility. How do you get everyone from project managers, BAs, developers, et cetera, to buy into that process? 6 votes.
Yell at them?
Yelling.
No, it's communicating the value. Everybody in that group needs to understand where the value of Agile and specifically testing fits into their role. And so it can't just be testing traditionally. A lot of times I think it's gotten the rap of just throw it over the fence, and it can't be that way. So there has to be value. As a PM, how does testing improve my job and make my life easier as a developer and so forth? So communicating that value to those roles.
And I think reinforcing the sort of fundamental point about everyone's measuring progress in the same way, like delivery of working software, like high quality, reliable, sustainable delivery of working software. And it's a whole team challenge, right? And just making sure that everyone's on the same page about that. That is the reason why Agile methods kind of evolved, or a big part of it.
And leveraging your definition of done.
Yeah.
As a team, if you commit towards that definition, sprint definition of done, then everyone has a part to play towards it.
Cool.
And I think it's also a matter of that concept of servant leadership. There's nothing better than to see the head of whatever down in one of the Scrum teams talking about it with the application in front of them, and they're testing it and giving you feedback. That's one of those great motivating things that I've seen.
Cool. In what ways is Agile disruptive, innovative, and revolutionary? All right, people are listening to the last one. That wasn't a real question. I made that one up. People listened to our speaker earlier. Thank you. How do you manage drastic velocity changes when working with vendor apps or major upgrades?
A velocity change still within the Scrum team, right? I mean, is the question, how do you make sense of that?
I would think that the question is centered around, let's say you have an ongoing team and you've got some cadence and you're trying to measure that, and then for whatever reason there is a major velocity change, I assume in a negative way, because everybody would be really excited if it was in a positive way.
Yeah.
So you have
Nobody would
some
question that.
you have some consequence or interaction where a velocity change has drastically been reduced, and it says, how do you manage that when working with vendor apps or major upgrades?
Well, I think there are two parts to it, right? First is, how do you proactively manage that? And then how do you reactively make sense of it, right? Proactively managing that means that, you continue to inject the discipline that Agile has to offer, to manage these risks, your roadblocks, your team's capacity and velocity proactively, just through the ceremonies and all the different constructs that we've harped on enough. Reactively, leveraging your retrospective sessions to really dissect what happened. Whether there was a positive, I would say whether it's a negative or a positive shift, which is drastic enough. It begs a conversation on what changed, what happened. If it's people related, if it's technology related, if it's something external that we may or may not have control over. It's leveraging your retrospectives to reactively make sense of it and manage it going forward.
How about you, Wendy? Massive velocity changes, major impact to speed of delivery within a sprint by a team. How do you manage that?
So, one is communication, right? Just so there are no surprises. Nobody likes surprises. So if they just magically see this, chart where not all the numbers are going up, which we all like to see, some things are going to go down, and that's okay. And then the other part is understanding why, and these things are going to happen. That's part of business, and that's people are going to get pulled onto something else, and you can't. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we focus so much on following the process that we kind of lose a little bit of common sense, and we're not talking about dealing with real problems as they're coming up. So no, I'm in the middle of a sprint. I can't talk to you on that high severity issue. That's not reality, So I think it's just balancing it and being able to communicate it and having a safe environment where you can say, yeah, we had a blip this sprint. No, yes. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not saying it's Joe's fault and that's unacceptable and we should fire Joe. It's we had an issue. Let's move on and let's figure out how we can get better next time.
Learn from it, expect and adapt.
You can't encourage transparency and failing fast and then berate those that are
Right.
failing.
It's confusing.
Yeah.
Hey, what's wrong with your velocity this sprint? Well, we tried something new and it didn't work out, so we're going to adjust.
Right.
Okay, and I hate when people have that. Well, whose fault is it? I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
I want to. Well, how are we going to recover from this? How are we going to move forward?
Yep. It's all about the team.
Team player, teamwork.
Yes.
Last
It is.
question.
It's usually, and that's what I usually do. I usually fall on the sword and say it's my fault.
It usually is.
I'll take it.
I prefer learning fast over failing fast as a way of thinking about that, just as an aside.
Cool.
Because 80 to 90% of your experiments will fail, but that's where the learning comes, right? So.
Right.
Not failing, you're not learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in life,
Well, the goal is to
right?
learn.
It's not.
The goal is not
Yeah.
to fail.
My best learning experiences have been
I
from
agree.
failing,
Not
for
all
sure.
that bad.
All right, now we're finally starting to get competitive. We said we were going to be
Coffee's
very
kicking in.
competitive, and they're
Yeah,
waiting
we
till the last
agreed we're going to
minute.
be nice to each other.
Bring out the gloves.
Wendy always had a sticker on her whiteboard that I really love, and it's always make new mistakes. Always make new mistakes. Love it. Last question. I know we're running over. Sorry, Jeff. I like this one. What Agile, I like all of them. I like this one particularly. What Agile ceremonies should we consider sacred, and which ones can we be more flexible with? So organizations doing Agile transformation, they're hearing the book, they're hearing burn downs and sprints and backlogs and Kanban and all this stuff for the first time, right? What ceremonies do you consider sacred? What is the stuff you kind of have to stick to? Is it what works or whatever works, or is there certain principles in Agile that you guys have seen over and over as like, this is what you need to do to start your Agile transformation off on the right foot?
I think sticking to, the ceremonies at least at the beginning for a while, so you get some sort of cadence, and then going down the path of adjustment and so forth. Not starting out with Scrum Bonafall, and then hopefully that's going to lead somewhere.
We were
Well,
Scraggle.
yeah, and I
fall,
think you
but
have to get to the point where you understand the essence of a practice before you start tweaking it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And it's, again, human nature to want to tweak stuff from the get-go before you even get it. Like, we changed the way we've done stand-up, I don't know, 50 times probably, and are constantly, but understanding that it's about collaboration, it's about understanding kind of when people need a hand, and to give people like me a little bit of insight into kind of where we are from a progress perspective. But you got to have an understanding of the essence before you chuck it out. Like pair programming, right? I mean, in order to understand the value of pairing, you better do it for quite a while, and try to do it the way it's recommended initially, right?
Awesome. Great. Thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
Not sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.